Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Jenny, and we're so glad you're here today.
Hello, Jenny.
Hi, sister.
Hi.
How are you?
I know Jenny and I are both, as you can hear, a little sick, but we never stop doing anything.
I don't know how we coordinated it. We're not even on the same continent right now.
It's tis the
it'll
season.
make more sense when we're living down the hall from each other.
Yeah, we're gonna be updating our little podcast studio, aka Jenny's bedroom.
Yep.
AKA, as my kids say.
Fine about those boundaries.
It's fine. Anyway, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. How are you? Besides being a little sick.
I'm okay. It's sunny here today. I had a nice walk, listened to some good Christmas music, a nice little mix.
You eat anything good?
Well, I was listening to Christmas music, and then Jenny has been listening to Colin Ray, which my high school boyfriend introduced me to back in 2000 and I don't know, 2000.
No, 2000. Yeah, 2000.
Yeah. And he's a Christian country singer, and my high school boyfriend was a Jewish boy from Long Island. Anyway, I was listening to Colin Ray, not Colin Hay. I like Colin Hay too.
Colin Hay is also a very good musician.
And it was just crazy. Like my high school boyfriend had introduced me to this album, and then I introduced it to Jenny, and it took me right back to being 16 when I was listening to the music. And it's just funny how music can do that. So I was listening to that. And how are you? Anything new? No. Okay.
No, I ate. I just want to tell everybody about the sandwich I ate before we recorded this podcast, though.
Please tell us.
It was from 12 Triangles. I'm going to. It was from 12 Triangles Bakery or Cafe. I don't know. 12 Triangles, which is a number of bakeries in Edinburgh, and there's a small one up the block from us. And they had it was ciabatta bread with peanut butter and like a sort of like Vietnamese style slaw, and it was really good. And good. Yeah, it was really good. It was like such an unusual thing, like chilies and stuff like that, and I just really liked the combination, and I ate that yesterday.
That sounds awesome.
That's what I've been eating.
Yeah. So we recently had the chance to talk to Katie Crenshaw, and I've been following Katie's journey for over a decade. She was one of the kind of OG bloggers, and honestly, I've looked up to her for so many years. She is so amazing at telling her story authentically, and just opening up her platform for good, which we always love, and really making sure people understand who she is. She doesn't hide anything. And we just had this really powerful conversation with her about marriage, divorce, co-parenting, what it means to be a parent, fresh starts in life, and also the influencer world, which I found really fascinating. Like, how do you live going through these big life changes when you have a platform as an influencer? And she really, I thought, was very honest in her answering about all that and, discussing that. So if you're somebody that was interested in kind of the behind the scenes of the influencer world and about people's relationships and marriages, and I mean, I dealt with families.
I think she does such a beautiful job of blending her family and keeping that going even through divorce. And we talked about the line between authenticity and intimacy, which I always think really is a really interesting conversation.
One of those people that you look to and you're like, well, she did it and I can do this too, and not everybody is like that. And she is a guidebook for so many people.
She's a good representation of it doesn't have to be bad for it not to be good too. We talk a lot. She talked a lot about the sort of like amicable divorces and how it's really hard for people to understand that narrative. And I just think it was such a wonderful conversation, and I'm glad she found the time to chat with us, and we really hope you enjoy the episode.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and we're here for anything. Enjoy the conversation with Katie like we did.
Hello, Katie. We're so glad to have you here today.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Katie Crenshaw is a writer, a mom to 3, an influencer, and an advocate. She is one of the OG bloggers and has used her platform to educate, inform, and advocate for over a decade. Her blogging and writing has become an outlet for authentic storytelling and has built a community of people through vulnerable and honest conversations. Her children's books, Her Body Can and His Body Can, which we love, celebrate the wonders and uniqueness of who we are and who we want to be. Katie is known for normalizing and celebrating body positivity, blended families, and honoring our own stories. I've known Katie for many, many years, but I'm thrilled to have her here. Katie, can you take us back to your fresh start wherever you feel like it begins?
Oh man, I feel like well, first of all, thank you. That was such a sweet introduction. I feel like my whole adult life has been fresh starts. So, but I guess the most recent one, I guess, that has been kind of the most conversation starting amongst my platforms has been my most recent divorce. So, I got divorced in well, I separated in 2020. Early 2020 is kind of when we made the decision to move that direction. And kind of simultaneously, I came out as pansexual, queer. It wasn't really linked to my divorce, although everything's kind of intertwined. But all of those announcements that year was definitely probably, one of the biggest like life altering fresh starts I've had, I'd say.
I would say so. So how did you feel kind of in the time leading up to that, knowing that you have this big platform of hundreds of thousands of people that you talk to and you are known for being authentic, and then you're grappling with kind of these big life changes? How did you deal with that?
That is very tricky, and there's no handbook. Yes, I built my platform on like talking about my real life and all these challenges that are happening. And it was number one, a true test in vulnerability, because there were years where I was like, oh, I'm so vulnerable. I can talk about like my body and I can talk about these different things. But when it came to talking about something that I was very um, like afraid of people's reaction, I all of a sudden didn't feel as vulnerable and I kind of wanted to hide it. And then there's also things you have to think about, like other people's privacy and things like that. So it was definitely tricky. It was like, it was hard to figure out how to remain authentic and talk about what I was really going through while not processing all this raw stuff like in real time for this audience, and again protecting the privacy of my kids, my ex-husband, all of that.
Olivia and I often talk about this sort of like tension between authenticity and intimacy, and how like we always want to be authentic with our audience, but like we also want to keep some intimate things for ourselves. And I think that I don't even know what it would feel like. I can't imagine what it must feel like to have such a large audience and know that like every Instagram story you post is going to be like dissected and like potentially end up on like snark blogs, right? Like that's a thing. And like, have all these people like look at it or learn from it or whatever it is. And it just, that must feel really charged all the time to sort of be constantly processing all of these things. And like you said, having your kids and worrying about them and your ex-husband and whoever else is in your life. I just like, I bow down to being able to process all of that, because it's a lot and it's hard to know, like, once you put something out there, it's hard to take it back. Right. So it's hard to know like what's going to feel too intimate and, and I want to like honor that and give space for that.
Thank you. I don't know. I guess it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how else I could have done it. I know that when something is so all consuming of your life and you're used to posting your day to day online, it is difficult. You don't realize it. You think I can just post like my shopping and my meals and whatever, and then I can be going through this in the background. But Olivia, like, it's hard when something is literally affecting every second of your day and you're like actively grieving and making all these logistical plans. Like, you can't not talk about it. It was very difficult. And it showed, I think, in my content. Like, I think there was a few months there where everything seemed very sterile and like branded, and it just didn't feel like me. And it was because I was really trying to not talk about any of that yet. and I didn't really have a choice. I don't think I could have done that differently, but it did feel nice once I was finally able to start explaining what was going on to my audience.
I have a logistical question, so I want to go back a little bit. So I've known you for years and years because you are one of the first real bloggers who had a platform and started doing sponsorships, and you kind of were at this height of the influencer world as one of these big creators. People looked up to you, you taught blogging, you did all this stuff. So when it came time to reveal kind of this intimate detail of your life, were you concerned from a business perspective, from the influencer standpoint?
Definitely. I grew the majority of my audience through this like nuclear family image. And even though, you know, Tyler was not my first marriage, um, I grew my audience through like having babies and toddlers, and like it was kind of a, you know, it was authentic and I had hard conversations, but at the end of the day, it was still kind of a representation of this like nuclear family life. And so yeah, and I did receive some backlash. There were people that had opinions. I think I had to really think about this because I couldn't remember. I think I started talking about being separated before I came out. I think
you did too. I think that
sounds
like,
right. Just
yeah. I was like, I was trying to remember because I know it was like close, but and it was also hard for me because a lot of my fresh starts came from a place of survival and needing to leave somewhere quickly, and like, you know, it was like dramatic, and like this wasn't, and it made it a lot more complicated, and it made it a lot more sad, and you know, there was a lot more feelings around it because I was in a safe marriage. I was in, you know, Tyler's a great guy. He was my best friend. We lived together for 8 years. There was a lot of grieving that I think a lot of people, I don't think it's as talked about as when you're in an abusive relationship or you're really unhappy and you just want to get out, and like there's all these other valid reasons for getting divorced, and I've been there too. And in this case, it was just kind of like we have to want more for each other, and that is going to be hard to like make that move. So it was also really kind of challenging from that end too, because I feel like without even meaning to, we drug our feet for a while. It was just kind of like, well, we'll do this. We'll get to this when we get to it. We'll separate this when we get to it. So yeah, it was interesting.
You guys had like a lot of years too. There was a lot of, I'm going to use the word drama happening. Like you moved to California, then there was the wildfires, and then like there was a lot of stuff. So I would imagine it would felt very natural to hang on to the person that was comforting to you and raising your children with you. And he was, you know, took your older son in as his own, and it was like this, it was this really powerful nuclear family. So of course you weren't going to separate during all this other turmoil. So when things got calm, I would imagine you looked at each other and you were like, oh, okay.
Well, I think for a lot of couples, right, COVID brought a lot of like reality to the surface because we were all of a sudden all home together, and my traveling stopped, and I had been traveling like probably once a month, and you know, we lived very separate lives, but it worked for us. And so when COVID happened and we were kind of like all at home together, it was just kind of facing a lot of, and Untamed came out at the same time. I blame Glennon Doyle for a lot. But
Glennon can come on this podcast and defend herself if she wants to.
Yeah, right. But yeah, it was just kind of all of a sudden like, oh, this is real life. And like, I don't know, a pandemic can also just kind of make you realize your mortality and like life is short, and don't we want more than this, and that kind of stuff. So
I think it's narratively really complicated when there's no villain. Like I ended my engagement. I was with this guy for 10 years. We lived together for 6. We were engaged for 2. And when it was very similar to what you're saying you and Tyler had. Like, it was just like, this is fine, but like, shouldn't we have great? Like, shouldn't it be better? And the thing with the travel is so funny too, because I traveled for work about 3 months out of the year, and he traveled for work too. And I used to be like, does this only work because we travel? Like, does this only work because like there's like times where we're both like the only one in the apartment? And I think that was partially true. But when I broke up with him, it was really hard for certain people in my life who wanted the best for me to not be like, well, he's this and he's that. And I looked at them and I was like, he's fine. That's not the problem. You know, he's fine. There's no villain. And it's so hard to leave a situation like that. And it's also so hard for people to sort of narratively comprehend that situation because like, it's fine. Like you're
so
safe,
much
you know?
less common. Yeah. And you know, a lot of people choose safety. And I'll be honest, I'll be perfectly honest in this process. Like I have grown such a greater empathy for people who do. I don't think that's the wrong choice for a lot of people. I think that it was really difficult to uproot everything in a lot of ways. And you know, I don't ever think there's a right choice or a wrong choice. I think there's just the choice you commit to. And I committed to start over. And you know, for somebody else, they might weigh it out and say, for now, it's easier for me to stay in a safe situation. There were a lot of things that got harder because of it, obviously. But you know, that's the choice we made, and that's what we have moved forward with. And I when I say there's not a right or a wrong situation or choice, I don't think that applies to everyone. I mean that in certain situations, there's not a right or a wrong choice.
When you're safe and you're relatively happy.
Yeah, everything.
You know, and you think maybe there could be more, but you don't have to go for more. You can just be safe and happy. That's okay too.
Yeah, and it's especially like in the middle of a pandemic and an economy like this. It's also like I constantly am thinking how many people aren't moving on because of finances and because, you know, it's not possible. It's literally not possible.
Yeah, it's so true.
Even though you were in, like, it was your second marriage, it was still this sort of traditional family structure. And I think it's really interesting talking about fresh starts, right? So you married Tyler, you had your son already, you had the 2 kids. Like that was a fresh start that was acceptable, right? And then you go and you sort of throw out the script, right? You end things with him and you come out, and I just wonder how that felt. Like there are fresh starts that people find acceptable, and then there are fresh starts that I think are harder for people to accept. And I guess I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that, of like having had those 2 mirrored experiences of publicly, you know, being like, this is my second husband, you know, blended family, and then also being like, and now this. And if people responded differently, I mean, obviously timing was different, years apart.
I think it was impossible for anybody, unless you were up close and personal to my life, to understand why I would want to leave, because our society, and Tyler would tell you the same thing. He, you know, the whole time we were together, Tyler was the fierce advocate of anti-patriarchal stuff, and he knows that like it wasn't fair the way people would be like, oh, that's so nice you gave her a break, or that's so nice you did the dishes. Like he hated that. So like he would tell you this too, but on the surface it's like, you had a nice husband that cooked dinner sometimes and like plays with his kids. Like what are you doing? Like how could you possibly, like you're so selfish, you know? And there was a person who was connected to his family who like left a really nasty comment on one of my posts one time, like just basically saying like, what are you doing? Like you're so selfish, and how could you do this to Tyler? And like that wasn't even Tyler's perspective. So it was like people were just like, you found a decent man who, you know, meets this like very low standard we have for men. I mean, Tyler's great, but like they don't care about any of the context of our relationship. Just, you have found this man, he does the bare minimum, why would you leave him? Like it was just very simple for so many people. So, and then when you add in that the aspect of like coming out, and then, you know, all these people's internal homophobia comes out, and then they're just like, wow. And nobody could comprehend that those two things were separate as they were. Like it was kind of more of a year of me realizing I need to be who I am. It wasn't like I need to leave my husband because I want to be with a woman. I didn't know who I would be with. I didn't know I could be with another man for the rest of my life for all I knew. It wasn't about that. It was just kind of a year of me identifying who I was to myself, and then speaking that out loud. And it wasn't like, oh, well, I'm gay, so I'm leaving him. Like, it was just kind of like, no, I'm just going to honor this person that I am in a million different ways. And there might be some crossover, but there might not.
So you spoke about Untamed. I also read Untamed in early March 2020, right? And all of that. And I remember at the time reading it thinking, "Oh shit, this is going to blow up a lot of stuff." What was it like in like the physical sensations, those rumblings, those whisperings that you get when you're like, something's happening here? What was that like, and what did you do about it? Did you talk to your therapist? Did you talk to friends? Like, take us down that journey a little bit.
So I had actually started working on a memoir. I guess I'll call it a memoir. It's not anything now but a first draft of a book. But it's I started kind of writing my life story and like all of these, this thread that goes through all of my stories of starting over, and just kind of this frantic pursuit of something. And so through writing that, which was in quarantine, like I needed something to do, and I wrote 50,000 words. And it was through retracing my steps of my life, and, dealing with all this stuff. Her Body Can my children's book had just kind of taken off at the beginning of quarantine also. There was just all these things happening. And then I read Untamed, and it really resonated with me, since Glennon, the author, she fell in love with a woman when she was married and had 3 children. And she just had so many poignant things to say in that regard, because it's a less common, situation. And I just started really, well, panicking, as someone who overanalyzes all of my feelings because I don't trust anything. I definitely did find a therapist that specializes in sexuality and transition in that way. And because, I knew they would help me analyze this and like make sure that I was right. Like, I needed somebody to confirm, and what I learned through that, it's funny because I remember saying, like, what is happening? Like, is this like, do I have mommy issues? Like, is this because of some trauma with men? Like, is this even real? And she was like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it could be, maybe, like, it doesn't matter. This is who you are, and this is what you want. And so, like, we don't have to figure out or like disqualify it or quantify it. Like, it just is. And that was good. And that was kind of like the beginning of me working on trusting my own intuition and all of that. And then, I spent the next several months. I talked to Tyler first. I talked to all my friends, and then, probably 6 to 9 months later is when I talked to my platform.
So I just want to ask a little bit about like the influencer stuff, because I think that that's so interesting, and you kind of have seen it, like on all different sides. I feel like. Do you feel like there's so much, like, have you ever lost a sense of kind of, while you were building this platform, of like what was real and what was not real in terms of like the things you're posting versus the things happening in your real life?
Yes and no. I started this because I love to create content. So like, it's interesting because there's always like the audience that wants completely uncurated whatever, and then there are people who still appreciate like aesthetic, because like you don't want to look at something that doesn't have some sort of aesthetic. So it's like there's always like these two camps, and I have always liked the blend of it. Like, I have always felt like I could use pretty compelling imagery and tell a story that is authentic. So I definitely can relate to having to ride that line. I still believe that it's okay to have curated content with an authentic message at the same time. That's still kind of who I am. But I don't know. This isn't exactly answering your question, but I feel like this many years into it, I definitely have gotten jaded by just influencer culture in general. It's not what it was. It's a lot more about keeping up with trends and algorithms and what other people want, and I can feel it pulling me further away from myself. And not only that, but internet trolls and keyboard warriors have gotten worse. And a lot of people think that would make your skin thicker, but for me, it just makes it worse. And I'm just like, I don't want to tell any more stories. I just want to try on clothes. Like, I'm tired. So yeah, it's a weird industry.
It is a weird industry. And I love that you brought up the trolls, because I was thinking about that too, even from like a real life, like you're not an influencer, let's say, when you go through something like a divorce or coming out, you are dealing, like you said, with the privacy of a lot of people, right? So even in my own divorce, I had people from, let's say, my ex's family who would come on, and you could see they were sneaking around and checking things out and stuff. Did you have a little bit of that too, kind of during these fresh starts in your life with other people, kind of like you said?
I think so, probably. And I definitely have heard things behind my back. This isn't my first divorce, and that happened in my last amicable divorce also. And like, I think that going back to the beginning of the conversation, it's important to remember that there is a large population of people that need a villain when there isn't one. And it's unfortunate, because I've had 2 really amicable divorces with kids involved, and people just dug until they found someone to hate. And it was usually me, because why not? I'm the one who initiated the divorces. And I hate to generalize this way, but I often feel like unless the man was blatantly abusive or cheating, like, people love to make women the villain. And it's just the way it is. Women are nags and bitches and selfish, and that's just kind of the narrative. And so sadly, I kind of feel like a lot of my life's work has just been, or like my internal work has been, accepting that I can't control what people write about me in their own minds. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. And it sucks, because in these situations, like me and my family and my friends, like, I feel like the people I've surrounded myself with and me, we're all very open. We're all very like, we're still cool. We still love you. And I feel like in a lot of cases, the support systems of my exes have been completely the opposite, and it doesn't feel fair, and it's frustrating. And I want to like get on a stage with a microphone and be like, but you don't know about this, this, and this, and you should probably like be open-minded to the fact that you weren't in my relationship, but you can't do that. So it's a lot of just accepting that people want somebody to be mad at.
It's true.
Yeah, they do. And they want somebody to blame. And I think that so often,
and they don't want it to be their person.
Right.
Yeah. Right. No. And what we hear about with divorce statistics is that women like ask for divorces, I think totally disproportionate amount. We still have not figured out what to do with strong women as a society. They still don't know what to do with us.
And we also haven't figured out what to do with amicable divorces. And I know it's not everyone's story, but it's more common than it used to be. And I can't tell you how many times in the legal process of all this, we have gotten stuck or confused, because everything legally, which, I know that it has to be, but so much legally is geared towards fights. So like, we've had to write our own papers. Like, we've had to file our own made up things, because everything is designed for people who hate each other. And that makes sense, but we're looking at things like, so we have to fill this out. Like, we have to make a choice here, because we were just going to like work that out amongst ourselves. And they're like, no, you have to, we even filed paperwork that the judge has never seen before. This is like a total side note. I haven't even talked about this to my platform, but we filed like a joint parenting plan with Grayson's biological dad and Tyler when we got divorced. And they've never seen anything like that. They were like very confused. They're like, we don't even know if we can file this. We had to reschedule the hearing to get it filed, because the judge is like, I don't want to file it. And then like a grand jury tells me I can't file it. Like, it's like, there is no handbook for people who want to do it well, for people who want multiple parents involved in a kid's life. Like, so yeah, I feel like a lot of the questions I've fielded of followers has been like, I need to know how to do an amicable divorce, because it seems like it's a lot harder to even figure that out than it is.
What, Olivia, what was the statistic? I think they didn't have no fault divorces in New York State until 2010,
Mhm.
which is crazy. I mean, how many people were getting divorced?
Yeah.
Our parents got divorced in 95, you know, and
Mhm.
that was a pretty amicable divorce. Like, it's insane. I mean, I think there's another not statistic, but like piece of information that like, because the only way to get divorced in the 60s in New York was through adultery, people would hire actresses to pretend to be the mistress. Like, there's just no way. They don't know how to comprehend the idea that maybe we just want more, right? Maybe we just want great instead of fine, and 100% happy instead of 60% happy. It's very hard for people to comprehend.
Yeah, that, and the fact that you would get remarried, like on a totally other note, like the shade of like, oh, well, why do you need to keep getting remarried? Like, why can't you just date? And like, I've told people that I'm open to being married again, and they're like, I don't understand. And it's like, well, why? If those things wouldn't have happened, I would be open to getting married. And you can't predict life, and some people want to be married.
You know, we grew up with a dad, a biological dad, and then a stepdad who became like he's like our father. And people did not and still don't understand it. You know, they really don't understand how we could love them both equally, how they both walked me down the aisle. It blew people's minds. Can you give like a little bit of background on like how, you know, because Grayson and Tyler have a beautiful relationship, and how did that come to be? Was there anything that you did or didn't do, or tips that you have like for somebody like me who is going to start dating again and bring somebody into my kid's life?
Oh man, I think I got lucky for a lot of that. Definitely when Tyler and I were dating, I would not have continued to date him if he was not open and, welcoming to me having a child. And at the time Tyler and I started dating, Grayson was 4, and that it was just kind of like a natural progression. And then we had Charlie, and without going into too much detail, obviously, to protect privacy in all those areas, it just kind of it was the natural progression of things for Tyler to kind of step into that role more for a few years there. Yeah. And then as Grayson got older, he wanted to be closer with his biological dad, and now he actually lives with his biological dad full time, and it's great. I mean, I don't feel like Grayson has suffered at all. He's always had 3 parents. We also all were very careful to never like make it like anybody was having a deficit. Like,
yeah,
if he was leaning on one parent more than the other, it was fine. We always presented it to Grayson like, you just have 3 parents. And when he was really little, we would say like, it's like Jay is like the president and Tyler's like the vice president, and
I love that.
like that. You just, everybody's equal. So we've always been really careful. I think that it comes down to, for kids, like the way the adults are talking about it. Yeah, and I'm dating now, and it's interesting. Oliver doesn't have kids, so that has definitely been a learning curve, especially when somebody has 2 little kids.
Yeah,
it's definitely a learning curve. It's a little different for us because they already knew Oliver, because he was my friend first, and Tyler's friend. So like, he had been around, and so they knew him. So I would have done things differently if it wasn't Oliver, I guess.
Yeah.
But I do think it's really important to keep that separate from your kids for as long as possible. I definitely didn't tell my kids that we were romantically involved for a long time. That he was just my friend still, and he was around a lot. I think that it is important to keep that as separate as much as you can until everybody is like absolutely on the same page. And always suggest therapy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I really do want to praise you though, for like you said that you submitted this parenting plan that involved all 3 children. The scariest thing, so our parents are not married. My mom and my stepdad aren't married, and my grandmother and our grandfather weren't married either, but he was our step grandfather. And there was a period of time where he left for like a year, our grandfather, and it was really hard because nobody was really thinking about like, well, are the kids okay? Are they seeing their grandfather? And there was a lot of other stuff going on at the time, but it was always really scary to me until I was about 30, honestly, to think about my parents splitting up, and things had, you know, there were good times, there were bad times, whatever. But, and to think that my mom, my stepdad would split up, and like, there was no parenting plan for that, right? Like, there was no way. And like, we always saw my dad, we split custody initially after the divorce, and then we went to every other weekend. But I was always like, well, where does Pat play into this? Because I would be very upset if I didn't get to see him, you know, regularly. And so I just want to like give you so much credit, because I think that it can be so easy to be like, well, they're not in their life anymore, don't worry about it. They're in, you know, he's the other two kids' dad, don't worry about it, and like move on. It's a very like 1980s perspective, but I want to give you credit
it's
for
also
that.
like very present now, because there is no plan for that. And like, I've had conversations. I mean, Oliver has been, he is in love with my kids. They live with him half the time, you know, because we live together. Right. And he's had moments where he's like, it's terrifying to think that if something happened to you, I would have no rights. Like, yeah, Tyler's a great guy, and like, I can trust in that a little bit, but it's like, if something happened to you, like, I may never see them again. Like, it just, step parents don't have that kind of, there's just nothing in our legal system to even opt into that. Which is unfortunate, because I feel like there should be as well. I feel like you should be able to apply for some sort of like guardianship rights or something, like something.
Yeah. Sounds like maybe Katie
like
needs to write another book. I was gonna children's book about step parents.
I'm gonna write a bill about how to include step parents. Yeah.
It's true. I think it was such a scary and devastating thing for me. And like, as a child of divorce, I'm sure I heard an argument between my mom and my stepdad. I think people are going to get divorced, you know, break up all the time. You don't understand that.
Well, so that is my biggest fear as a mom. Like, my biggest fear as a mom is that my kids are going to think like nobody is permanent, because I'm, you know, I'm like, oh no, am I?
Yeah. It's quite the opposite though, right? You're showing them that no matter what, anybody can be permanent. Like, which is actually so much more beautiful, because you're showing them that people change, relationships change, but like how somebody loves you and makes you feel like that's permanent. And if you want them in your life, like, you can keep having them. Right. And which is such an important lesson over just the like, he is your dad, he won't go away, because that's kind of like cemented. You want something to be more fluid.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Thank you. This is therapy for Katie.
You know, I mean, it's true. And like, I mean, I always talk to my boys about like, family is what you make it, right? Like, family is the people that love you and will take care of you and be there for you. And, you know, our brother was 4 when we met our stepdad, and he doesn't even remember time before that. And so, you know, I think it's so special, and every parent brings something to the table, right? Grayson's going to get something different from his biological dad than he's going to get from Tyler. And I love that. I always think of the Santa Claus movies where when he has, you know,
I do too. That's so funny.
You know, he has the relationship with the new whatever, and it's like
Neil.
Right. And it's so right. It's so exactly. I love that you truly are speaking about all of these things. So talk to us a little bit about Oliver, because I love your love story, and it's been awesome to see it. So how did that kind of come to be? And, you know, yeah,
people also don't love that this story is not juicier than it truly is, but it's so funny. So Oliver actually was my little brother's like first best friend when we moved to a new town when we were little. And so my brother is 3 years younger than me, 2.5 years younger than me, and he just had this little nerdy friend that, you know, they made like Harry Potter wands and stuff. It was weird, and I was older and was like, you guys are weird. And I was friends with Oliver's older sister, and like their mom was a substitute teacher. It was a very small town. You know, our families knew each other and whatnot. But I didn't know him well because he was younger than me, and you know, in school, like people younger than you, like you don't know them. And so I lost touch, or like I just never really knew what happened until we, like a few years ago, my brother was turning 30, and his friends like all made him like this compilation video for his birthday saying happy birthday, and I watched it, and I was like, I didn't even know you were friends with Stephen Pierce, like Oliver's brother. And he was like, that is Oliver. Like, Oliver transitioned like you're so out of the loop. And I was like, oh my God, I did not know that. I was like, okay. And I had started my podcast, which was like talking to people,
Yep.
you know, with
which I
still
loved.
marginalized
I know.
stories.
We need to bring it
I
back.
love-
We need to
love
bring
that
it back.
podcast.
I know.
I need to do all sorts of passion projects right now. I'm so burned out. But anyway, I was like, oh, cool. Would he talk on my podcast? Like, I hate to just like suddenly be like, hello, haven't talked to you in a long time. Will you talk about being trans on my podcast? And he's a trans man, and he was like, sure. So he came over and did the podcast, and it was great. And we just kind of like, you know, hit it off as friends. Hadn't seen him in forever. He was dating another one of our friends back then, and like literally the four of us used to hang out, me and Tyler and Oliver and his girlfriend for a while. And Oliver come over sometimes, whatever. We were just friends. I think we were both just never even like literally never crossed our minds. And I talked to Oliver early on when I was first questioning my sexuality, which was like even before, probably a year before I talked to Tyler, just because I trusted him, and he had such a, I was very inspired by his journey, as coming out as a trans man, like being from a small town. Like he definitely had all the obstacles. Yeah. And so we had talked about that and stuff. And then after Tyler and I separated, we literally were, it was still like partial pandemic times where you weren't really hanging out with a lot of people. And Oliver had broken up with his girlfriend several months before, and we just were like hanging out, and it was just kind of like we had this like mutual, oh, we're single now and we've had a few beers, like maybe there's some chemistry here. And it was like the first like really realization of that. And then I think we both tried to be like Oliver definitely was like, I don't know if I'm ready like for a relationship. Like he is in a 4-year toxic relationship, and I, you know, was newly out of this marriage, and but you know, history and the future had other plans, so we just kept going, and here we are.
No, I love that. I love that. What was it like though? Like you've done a lot of healing, right, in the last like 10 years, I would say. But you know, so what this in this relationship, how are you different and showing up differently than you may have in the past?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a whole other podcast episode. I was not ready for, there's a meme that circulates sometimes that's like your first healthy relationship is like the hardest one or whatever. Because I was under the guise that my relationship with Tyler was healthy because it was so uneventful, and that was so wrong. That was so false. Like we just didn't really have a relationship. Like there was no work, there was no trying to hear each other. Like we just kind of lived separate lives, and I was just so in a fog of thinking like, oh, I'm so healthy, like I've gained all this growth like in my 8 years with Tyler, like because we never argued, like nothing, because we didn't have a workable relationship. And I didn't realize that until I was in a relationship with Oliver, who, you know, he has his own wounds and stuff, but like when you're actually actively having to face your old wounds and triggers with somebody that you are actively trying to have a working real dynamic with, it will throw you for a loop. So healing for me has not been like peaceful and whatever. It has been like having to face old triggers and like face the old trauma and like learn how to hear somebody and learn how to compromise, and like things I haven't had to do because I was in a very dead place where I just had my own life. You know, I was essentially single mentally. So it's been that part of the learning curve is like, I'm so grateful for all that growth, but it has been messy and ugly. And I've had to face parts of myself that I didn't know I had, that I don't like, you know, to get through them. So, so yeah, I would say this has been the most active part of my healing because I'm being challenged relationally, to, you know, love somebody and compromise and all those things, which is great.
Yeah.
There's that TikTok therapist, I can't remember his name, but I saw a video of his, and I quote this a lot. Olivia hears me quote this a lot. That's like, it's not about finding a partner who doesn't trigger you. It's about finding a partner who, when you're triggered, you can work through it with them.
Is his name Ben or something? I love that guy.
I think that's right. Yeah. And I feel bad. We'll have to tag him in the notes because,
Yeah.
you know, credit to him on this one. Like, I feel that so intensely because I describe what I did with my ex as like parallel play. Like, we were like kind of next to each other for 10 years, but not really like engaging. And we were good fighters, he and I. Like, we would, you know, we were good at that, but like not like mean, and we didn't, you know, call each other names. But it's so interesting for me, like, every once in a while with Thomas and something comes up and I'll like respond to him and we're both like, whoa, what was that? And then we like talk about it. And I'm like, this is a thing that people do. Like, I just had never been with anybody that knew how to talk me through, like with me, with my emotions. And it's a fascinating, and like, it's hard because you want to show up for that person that like you're so excited about and kind of be better than you were in previous relationships, but it doesn't always get to be quite like that. The better is the working through it with them, right? The better.
I was going to say, like, the
trying.
first step is having to look in the mirror and acknowledge that you don't know what to do. Like, instead of being like, well, I'm right, and so I'm just going to move out of this. I mean, there have been times, transparently, where we've almost broken up because it's been like, this is uncomfortable, and like, I don't know if I'm down for like how much work this is going to be, because for both of us, and we both realized that like neither one of us have ever been in a healthy relationship, like, ever. And so we're like, we're both starting from scratch. It's like we're both learning, like, this is how you talk, this is how you you know, this is how you table things, this is how, like, there's it's like brand new information. But at the same time, you know, whether we stay together forever or we have other relationships in the future, this is like incredibly important work that we're learning. Relationally.
And on the inverse side of that, like, you get to sort of like, all these parts of your mind get to be freed up because you're met on so many other levels, and you get to maybe explore different parts of your personality or hobbies, you know, that were occupied before.
Yeah, I think one of my friends said a really good thing early on after I had divorced, because I was like, Oliver is a very simple, like, sit in the yard all day and like make a fire and like, you know, don't look at your phone. Like, he's just very simple, and I loved it immediately. I had been like full swing on the internet for like years and traveling all the time and all this stuff, and I was like, I love this. I don't ever want to pick up my phone again, but I have to because that's my job. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, why do I suddenly like not care about my job or like anything I was doing anymore? And my best friend was like, sometimes escapism like is our reality. Like, my escapism from my former situation was my job, and you know, going balls to the wall on all this stuff. And so then it was like, I was just happy with Oliver and like his company and stuff, and I was like, oh, like, I have to make myself do that stuff now. Especially in the beginning of the relationship, when it was like, oh, I just want to sit in the yard and do nothing and put my phone away for a week. Because I didn't want to do that before. So exactly.
So Katie, do you have any wise words for anybody who is thinking about maybe going through a divorce or a fresh start in their life?
I think that the wisest there, I mean, I could have a million words, but I think one of the most common things that comes up when I'm talking to people about starting over, and something I wish I had thought about before, is that you almost never are going to have 100% clarity on a decision, including starting over. And you're going to have to learn to take 80% and 90% as your answer, because expecting yourself to have 100% clarity on a decision and then never having it is just going to set you up for like constant guilt and always wondering what you should have done. So I think you have to take 80% and 90% as your answer, and then you have to commit to the choice you make, and that is all you can do.
I love that. And then one more fun question. What was the last thing you ate that you really loved?
Oh man, I feel like I just ate something that was really good. Oh, some elote at a Mexican restaurant the other night downtown.
Ooh, so good.
That sounds
So
great.
good.
So good.
Katie, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. And you are always so gracious with sharing your story with the world. And it really truly has, changed so many people's lives. We didn't even get into your activism, which is something else I wanted to talk about with you. So we'll have to have you back on to talk about all of that, because you are truly an advocate for so many things. And I think have really helped women find their voice in this political world. So just keep doing what you're doing, because we have truly loved following your journey, and we're proud to call you friends, and we're just really proud of you and all of the work that you've done. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here, and we're proud of you. Until next time, brave one.
A Fresh Story is brought to you by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to start again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at freshstartsregistry.com/podcast.